The wind hasn't stopped in 3 days. It moves through the valley like something alive, like something hunting, pressing against the hide walls of the shelter until the leather creaks and groans under the weight of it. Inside, a small fire struggles against the cold. The flames are low now, barely enough to see by, and the wood is almost gone. There was supposed to be more wood. There was supposed to be food. There was supposed to be safety here. 17 people crouch in the darkness. Their breath rises in pale clouds that vanish before they reach the smoke hole above. A child coughs, a wet rattling sound that no one acknowledges because they have all heard it before. They have heard it for days. They know what it means. Outside, snow has buried the landscape under a silence so complete it feels like the world has stopped. The reindeer that were here last season never came. The river that should have thawed by now remains locked under ice too thick to break. The roots they gathered in autumn ran out weeks ago. Someone will have to leave soon. Someone will have to walk into that white emptiness and find something, anything, or no one will survive. But no one moves. This is how it happened. This is how it always happened. Not with war, not with plague, not with some great catastrophe written into stone. Most humans died quietly, in shelters just like this one, surrounded by people they trusted, in places they believed would keep them safe. They died because they made a choice that felt right. They died because they stayed. The story of human survival is not a story of strength. It is not a story of intelligence. It is not a story of the fittest rising above the weak. It is a story of mistakes, repeated across continents and centuries, by people who were no less clever than anyone living today. They built shelters. They made tools. They understood fire, understood hunting, understood the rhythms of seasons better than any modern person ever will. And still, most of them vanished. The archaeological record is not a continuous thread. It is a series of beginnings and endings. Camps established and then abandoned. Tools scattered and never retrieved. Bones left where they fell. For every group that made it through the Ice Ages, hundreds did not. For every lineage that survived into the present, thousands terminated in silence. The question that haunts the study of human prehistory is not how we survived. It is why so many of us didn't. The answer is not what you might expect. It is not that they lacked resources. It is not that they faced impossible odds. It is not that they were unlucky. The answer is that they made a decision, the same decision, over and over again, in different places and different times, and that decision killed them. They believed they had found safety, and they stopped moving. It begins with fear. Fear is the oldest inheritance. Long before humans walked upright, long before the first stone was shaped into a blade, fear was already wired into every ancestor that would eventually lead to a fear of predators, fear of darkness, fear of the unknown. Fear kept our ancestors alive through millions of years of evolution, and that success made it powerful. It made it automatic. When early humans encountered a place that seemed to offer protection, every instinct screamed at them to stay. A cave with a narrow entrance, a valley surrounded by cliffs, a riverbank with good visibility in all directions. These places felt safe, and that feeling was intoxicating. After weeks of exposure, after nights spent watching for predators, after the exhaustion of constant movement, the idea of stopping was almost overwhelming. The body wanted rest, the mind wanted certainty, and when both align, choice becomes difficult. But here is what fear never understood. Safety is not a place. Safety is not a shelter. Safety is not a wall between you and the world. Safety is movement. Safety is adaptation. Safety is the willingness to leave before you have to. The humans who died in those shelters were not failures. They were not inferior. They were listening to the same instincts that had protected their ancestors for millions of years. The tragedy is that those instincts were designed for a different world. They were designed for environments that changed slowly, where a good hunting ground might remain productive for generations, where climate shifted over centuries rather than decades. But the Ice Ages were not that world. The Ice Ages were chaos written in weather, resources appearing and disappearing, temperatures swinging wildly between seasons, entire ecosystems shifting in the span of a single lifetime. The rules had changed. The instincts hadn't. Picture what happens when a group finds what they believe is a perfect location. They establish a camp. They learn the landscape. They map where the water flows, where the animals cross, where the plants grow thick in spring. This knowledge takes time to acquire, and once acquired, it becomes precious. It becomes an investment, and investments create attachment. After a season in one place, leaving feels like loss. After a year, it feels like betrayal. After longer, it becomes almost unthinkable. The landscape stops being a resource to be used and becomes something closer to home. Humans are not built to abandon homes easily. We are built to defend them, to improve them, to believe in them even when evidence suggests they are killing us. This is the pattern that appears again and again in the archaeological record. Sites that show long-term occupation followed by sudden collapse. Middens filled with the bones of prey animals that slowly transition to smaller and smaller species as larger game disappears. Fire pits that grow colder as fuel becomes harder to find. Storage pits that held less and less each season until they held nothing at all. The people who lived in these places saw the decline. They must have. They were not blind. They were not stupid. They watched the herds thin. They watched the forests recede. They watched the rivers change course or run dry. And still they stayed. Why? Because leaving is terrifying in a way that staying never is. Staying is passive. Staying is familiar. Staying lets you believe that tomorrow might be different, that the rains might come, that the herds might return, that the crisis is temporary. Leaving is an admission of failure. Leaving means walking into uncertainty, abandoning everything you have built, risking death in the hope of finding something better that might not exist. Most humans chose to stay. Most humans died. There is a site in Central Europe, a rock shelter that was occupied repeatedly over thousands of years. The deposits tell a story that repeats with terrible regularity. A group arrives, they hunt, they gather, they thrive for a generation, sometimes two. Then the climate shifts, or the game moves, or disease sweeps through. And instead of following the resources, instead of adapting to the change, they intensify, they hunt harder, they range farther from camp each day, returning with less and less. They strip the local vegetation. They burn more fuel to ward off the cold they can no longer escape. And then, the deposits go silent. The occupation ends. Sometimes there are bones that were not buried properly. Sometimes there is evidence of fire that was not tended. Sometimes there is nothing at all, just an absence, a gap in time before another group arrives and begins the cycle again. This was not one tragedy. This was hundreds, thousands. The mistake was not failing to prepare. Many of these groups had sophisticated storage techniques. They dried meat. They cached food in pits dug into permafrost. They planned for winter, for drought, for hardship. But they planned for hardship in one place. They built systems designed to survive bad seasons, not to survive the end of the world they knew. When the environment changed beyond what their systems could absorb, they had no backup. They had invested everything in a single location, a single strategy, a single way of living. And when that way of living failed, they had nothing left. The humans who survived did something different. They built systems that could move. They maintained knowledge of distant territories, even territories they hadn't visited in years. They kept relationships with other groups, not out of sentiment, but out of survival, because those relationships meant refuge if everything collapsed. They valued flexibility over security, movement over permanence, options over certainty. This was not intuitive. It required overriding every instinct that screamed for stability. It meant leaving good camps before they had to. It meant traveling in harsh conditions. It meant accepting discomfort as a feature of life rather than a problem to be solved. It was harder, it was more exhausting, and it was the only thing that worked. Consider fire. Fire was humanity's great advantage, the technology that changed everything. It provided warmth, it provided protection, it made food safer to eat, it extended the day into darkness. For tens of thousands of years, fire was the difference between survival and death. But fire also created dependence. Fire required fuel. Fuel required forests, or dung, or peat, or some source of combustible material that could be gathered and stored. And when humans settled too long in one place, they exhausted their fuel supply. They cut trees faster than they could regrow. They stripped the landscape of anything that would burn. And then, in the depths of winter, when they needed fire most, they had nothing. There are sites where archaeologists have found evidence of fires that burned smaller and smaller over time. Fires that shifted from large hardwood logs to smaller branches to scrub to dried grass. This is the signature of a group slowly freezing to death, rationing heat until there was no heat left to ration. They could have moved. When the nearby wood ran out, they could have relocated to where the forests were still intact. But they didn't, because moving meant abandoning everything else they had built. Moving meant starting over. Moving felt like dying, so they stayed and died instead. The same pattern appears with water, with game, with every resource humans depended on. Overexploitation followed by collapse. Abundance followed by scarcity. And at the center of every collapse, the same fatal hesitation. The refusal to leave until it was too late. This is not a flaw unique to prehistoric human. This is a flaw written into the architecture of the human mind. We are designed to seek stability. We are designed to build and defend. We are designed to believe that what is true today will be true tomorrow. These are not weaknesses under normal circumstances. These are the foundations of civilization, of agriculture, of everything that makes modern life possible. But they become fatal when the environment is unstable, when the ground is shifting, when the rules are changing faster than habits can adapt. Behavioral archaeology studies not just what ancient humans made, but what they did. It reconstructs the patterns of daily life from the debris left behind. And what it reveals, again and again, is that survival was determined not by individual acts of heroism, but by accumulated decisions, small choices that compounded over weeks and months and years. The choice to stay one more season. The choice to hunt the last breeding pair because hunger was immediate and consequences were abstract. The choice to build a permanent shelter instead of maintaining mobile camps. The choice to invest in tools that were efficient for local conditions but useless anywhere else. The choice to have more children than the territory could support because there was food now and the future was hard to imagine. Each choice made sense in the moment. Each choice brought immediate benefit, and each choice locked in a trajectory that led toward extinction. This is what it means to say that evolution favored flexibility. Evolution did not favor the strongest. It did not favor the smartest. It favored the groups that could let go. The groups that could read the signs of collapse and act before evidence became proof. The groups that could accept short-term loss to avoid long-term catastrophe. The groups that could leave what they had built. Most groups couldn't do this. Most groups held on. Most groups vanished. There is a particular cruelty in how nature punishes the inflexible. It does not announce disaster. It does not deliver collapse in a single moment that clarifies everything. It erodes. It diminishes. It creates slow starvation that feels like temporary hardship. It allows hope until hope becomes a trap. The groups that stayed watched their world shrink around them. They watched the forests recede, the herds thin, the rivers change course. And at every stage, the situation felt survivable. Difficult, but survivable. The brain is not equipped to extrapolate slow decline into total collapse. The brain sees the present and assumes the future, and so they stayed, adjusting to each diminishment, normalizing each loss, until there was nothing left to adjust to. The survivors were not smarter, they were not stronger, they were not better adapted in any genetic sense. They were simply more willing to be uncomfortable. They were willing to leave comfort for uncertainty. They were willing to abandon investment for possibility. They were willing to accept that no place was permanent, no safety was guaranteed, no success was proof against future failure. This is the inheritance that runs through every modern human. Not the genes of the strongest, but the habits of the flexible. Not the survival of the fittest, but the survival of those who could let go. And here is where the story turns uncomfortable, because the pattern did not end with the Ice Ages. The Ice Ages revealed the pattern. They tested it against annihilation and selected for the traits that could survive it. But the traits that failed are still here. They are still wired into every human brain. They still govern decision-making in ways that are invisible until crisis arrives. Modern civilization is built on permanence. It is built on the belief that investment compounds, that infrastructure endures, that what works today will work tomorrow. We build cities in floodplains. We build economies on resources we know are finite. We build societies on assumptions of stability that have never been true for any environment humans have ever inhabited. The instinct to stay, to invest, to believe that this time is different, this place is special, this system is stable, these are the same instincts that filled those ancient shelters with the bones of people who never left. The same hesitation that killed our ancestors is still killing us now, in different forms, at different scales, with different consequences. The question is not whether we have learned. The question is whether we can learn. Whether the same minds that were shaped by 100,000 years of crisis can recognize crisis in new forms. Whether we can override the ancient certainty that tells us to stay, to hold, to wait for conditions to return to normal. There is no evidence that we can. There is only evidence that some of us did, once, when the cost of failure was extinction, when the pressure was absolute, when every mistake was fatal. The survivors did not become us because they were better. They became us because they left. The wind is still blowing. It has not stopped.